The pool was Karen Davison's masterpiece. It wasn't just a hole in the ground filled with chlorinated water. It was a mosaic of memories, a liquid monument to a life well lived. Each iridescent tile was handpicked, a specific shade of cobalt she and her late husband, Frank, had discovered on a trip to Santorini 30 years ago. The gentle curve of the deep end, the 3 wide steps leading into the shallows, the soft, submersible lights that made the water glow like a captured nebula at night, every detail was an echo of Frank's laughter, a testament to the promise he'd made to give her a small piece of the Aegean Sea in their own backyard. 4 or 5 years after his passing, the pool was her sanctuary. It was where she swam laps each morning, the rhythmic strokes a meditation against grief. It was where she taught her grandchildren to float on their backs, their squeals of delight a balm on her lonely heart. It was her quiet rebellion against the encroaching grayness of widowhood, a vibrant, shimmering blue declaration that life and beauty still remained. So when the first letter from the Homeowners Association arrived, she dismissed it as a bureaucratic error. Tucked into her mailbox between a seed catalog and a letter from her sister, the crisp, cream-colored envelope felt deceptively benign. The letterhead, however, was new. Oakwood Preserve Homeowners Association, now with a far more aggressive, spiky oak tree in the logo. The signature at the bottom was also new. Bartholomew Abernathy, President. The letter was brief and brutal. It cited a violation of Bylaw 117.4, unauthorized structural alterations. It claimed her in-ground pool, the one that had been approved, celebrated, and enjoyed for nearly a decade, was now out of compliance. It gave her 30 days to submit a remediation plan for immediate removal. Removal. The word was a punch to the gut. She laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. They couldn't be serious. Abernathy was a new resident, a retired city administrator with a penchant for measuring his neighbor's lawn height with a ruler and a sour disposition that seemed to curdle the very air around him. He'd won the HOA presidency a few months back on a campaign of restoring Oakwood's prestige, which, as far as Karen could tell, meant harassing anyone with a garden gnome or a basketball hoop. Her first call to him was a study in condescension. "Mr. Abernathy, this is Karen Davison at 12 Gable Lane. I believe there's been a mistake regarding a letter I received about my pool." "No mistake, Mrs. Davison." His voice oozed a kind of smarmy, procedural satisfaction. Bylaw 117.4 is quite clear. The previous board was lax. "I am not lax. My pool was fully approved. I have the permits, the signed approval from the board at the time, the architectural plans. Frank and I went through every hoop imaginable." "The past is irrelevant," he said, the finality in his tone like a slamming door. "This board has reviewed the case. The structure is a liability. The materials are not up to the new code." "New code? What new code? You can't just retroactively apply new rules to existing structures." "That's not how any of this works," Karen argued, her voice rising despite her best efforts to remain calm. Frank had always been the calm one. She could feel her own temper, a shorter, spiky thing, beginning to fray. "You have 30 days, Mrs. Davison. I suggest you consult a contractor." The line went dead. For a week, Karen was a whirlwind of righteous fury. She dug out the old files, a thick binder filled with permits, receipts, and the original, signed HOA approval letter. She scanned and emailed them to the entire board. She received a single 2-sentence reply from Abernathy. "Documents received. The board's decision stands." She tried to rally her neighbors. She went door to door, binder in hand. Most offered sympathetic but useless murmurs. "Oh, that's terrible, Karen," said Mrs. Gable from next door, peering through a crack in her door, "but Abernathy is just, well, you know. It's best not to get on his bad side." Others were less kind. The Millers, a young couple who had always complained about the sound of her grandchildren splashing, simply shrugged. "Rules are rules," Mr. Miller said, a faint, triumphant smirk on his face. She was alone. The 30 days bled away, each sunset a reminder of the ticking clock. A second letter arrived, this one via certified mail. The language was colder, sharper. It informed her that if she failed to comply, the HOA would exercise its right to cure the violation by hiring its own contractor. The cost of the demolition, it stated in bold, black letters, would be placed as a lien against her property. Her sanctuary was now a weapon being used against her. The thought of a lien, of them forcing her out of the home Frank had built, was terrifying. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about everything. On the morning of the 31st. Karen stared at George, the roar of the backhoe fading into a dull, distant hum. His words hung in the air, a strange counterpoint to the brutal reality of the destruction. "What are you talking about, George? What else could it be about?" George flinched as another slab of concrete crashed into the water. He pulled her by the elbow, his grip surprisingly firm, leading her away from the patio and toward the side of the house, partially shielded from Abernathy's view by a large azalea bush. "Not here," he hissed, his eyes darting nervously toward Abernathy, who was now taking a call on his cell phone, a thin smile playing on his lips. "He watches everything. Everyone." The numbness that had enveloped Karen began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The tears had stopped. The grief was still there, a hard knot in her chest, but something else was growing around it, a steely, unfamiliar resolve. She looked at George's terrified face and understood. This was more than a neighborhood squabble. "My kitchen," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. Now, inside, the sounds of demolition were muffled but still sickeningly present, like a heartbeat in the walls. Karen automatically went to the coffee machine, her hands moving with a purpose her mind hadn't quite caught up to. George stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, wringing his hands. "I shouldn't be here. If he sees my car..." "He's busy destroying my life, George. I doubt he's checking license plates," Karen said, her tone harder than she intended. She handed him a mug of coffee. His hands were shaking so badly it rattled against the ceramic. "Now talk." George took a deep, shuddering breath. "Abernathy isn't just some power-crazed retiree. He used to be a city planner, specifically in the zoning and development department. He was, let's say he was encouraged to take an early retirement. There were whispers. Deals made with developers, things getting pushed through that shouldn't have." Karen listened, her mind racing, connecting invisible dots. "And what does that have to do with Oakwood Preserve?" "Everything," George said, his voice dropping lower. "This neighborhood, the land it's on, it backs up to the old quarry. That quarry was sold 6 months ago to a company called Apex Consolidated." The name meant nothing to her. A construction company? A development corporation. A big one. They build luxury condos, high-end retail spaces, and they want to expand. The problem is, the only way for them to get a profitable road access to the quarry property is through Oakwood Preserve. The coffee mug felt heavy in Karen's hand. She set it down on the counter. The rhythmic thudding from the backyard suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. "They need to build a road," she whispered. George nodded, his eyes wide. "A 4-lane access road, according to the preliminary plans I saw. It would cut right through the neighborhood. But to do that, they need to buy up properties. And nobody here wants to sell. We like our quiet little cul-de-sacs. So Abernathy is Apex's man on the inside," George finished. "He got himself elected HOA president to make life miserable for everyone. He's using the bylaws to bury people in fines, threaten them with liens, devalue their properties until they have no choice but to sell. He's a vulture, sent in to soften up the prey." The strategy was diabolical in its simplicity. It wasn't one big, obvious land grab. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts. A fine for a trash can left out too long. A violation for an unapproved mailbox color. A lien for a perfectly legal, decade-old swimming pool. "Why me, George?" Why start with me so aggressively? George wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared into his coffee mug. Your lot, Karen. It's the key. Look at the neighborhood map. Your property is wider than most, and it sits at the perfect angle. For their proposed road to have the gentle curve required by county regulations, it has to cut directly across your backyard. The backyard where her pool used to be. The pool that was now an obstacle being systematically removed. The lien that would be placed against her home for the cost of that removal was the final, perfect chess move. Once they foreclosed, the property would be theirs for a fraction of its value. A cold fire ignited in Karen's veins. It burned away the last vestiges of her grief and fear. Frank hadn't just built her a pool. He'd built her a home on the one piece of land a faceless corporation coveted most. And they had sent their jackal to tear it all down, starting with the thing she loved most. How do you know all this, George? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. He finally looked up, his face etched with shame. Before I retired, my accounting firm had a few unsavory clients. Apex Consolidated was one of them. I saw some of their early project proposals. When Abernathy moved in and immediately ran for the board, I recone. The words on the screen seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. Daughter. It wasn't just a conspiracy. It was a family business. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They fused together with the heat of Karen's rage, forming a single, ugly picture of greed. Abernathy wasn't just a corporate stooge. He was a father paving the way for his daughter's triumph, and her home was the cobblestone. George peered over her shoulder, his breath catching in a wheeze. Oh no. Oh dear Lord. It's worse than I thought. Worse. Karen's laugh was a brittle, chilling sound. No, George. It's better. It's so much better. She clicked on the article, her eyes scanning the professionally written fluff piece. It painted Sarah Jessup as a prodigy, a hometown hero returning to revitalize the region. There was a photo of her, crisp and corporate in a tailored blazer, shaking hands with the mayor. She had her father's cold, calculating eyes. Better? Karen, they're working together. This is nepotism, collusion, it's a fortress. Every fortress has a crack, George, Karen said, closing the laptop with a decisive snap. The woman who had cried over her pool that morning was gone. In her place was someone Frank would have recognized, the fierce, unyielding woman who had once stared down a hospital administrator to get him the experimental treatment that gave them 5 more years together. They think this is a legal battle, a war of bylaws and liens. They're expecting me to hire a lawyer to fight them in court. That's their home turf. They've got a dozen lawyers on retainer. We're not going to play their game. George squeaked, looking toward the door as if contemplating a mad dash. Karen fixed him with a stare that was both a plea and a command. You're in this now, George. You know what they're doing. You can either hide in your house and wait for them to come for you next, or you can help me stop them. Your choice. The retired accountant, a man who had spent his life balancing ledgers and avoiding conflict, looked at the wreckage in Karen's backyard, then at the iron resolve in her eyes. He saw the future Abernathy was creating for them all, a future of fines and foreclosures. He let out a long, slow sigh of resignation. What do you need me to do? I need to know everything about Sarah Jessup. Not the corporate shark. The woman. Where does she eat? Where does she shop? Who are her friends? What does she care about besides money? Karen began to pace her kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. They've made this personal. So we're going to get personal. For the next week, Karen's home became a war room. The binder of pool permits was replaced by a corkboard, the kind she used for quilting patterns. In the center, she pinned the glossy photo of Sarah Jessup. George, using his skills for navigating the labyrinthine world of public records and online databases, began to build a profile. He found her address, a sterile, glass-walled condo downtown. He found her car, a silver Tesla. He found her social media profiles, carefully curated feeds of charity galas, groundbreaking ceremonies, and inspirational quotes about leadership. "It's a ghost," George said in frustration, pointing at the screen. "Everything is polished, professional. There's nothing here. No family, no real friends, just business contacts." "Nobody's a ghost, George," Karen countered, studying the photos. "Look closer." She pointed to a picture of Sarah at a fundraiser for the city animal shelter. In a sea of posed smiles, Sarah was holding a small, scruffy terrier, and for a fraction of a second, the camera had caught something genuine in her eyes. A flicker of warmth. "She likes dogs." It was a start. The next day, Karen put on a floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat, transforming herself into the very picture of a harmless, slightly dotty grandmother. She drove to the city animal shelter. For 3 hours, she volunteered, cleaning cages and cooing over kittens, all while chatting amiably with the staff. "Oh, Sarah Jessup," said a young volunteer named Chloe, her eyes lighting up. "She's our biggest donor. She's amazing. She funded our entire new canine wing. She's on the board, actually. She's hosting the big annual Paws for a Cause gala next month." Bingo! Karen came home with a pamphlet for the gala. The tickets were $1,000 a plate. "We're not going to the gala, are we?" George asked, his face paling at the price. "No," Karen said, a predatory glint in her eye. "We're going to the planning committee meeting." It took 2 phone calls and a carefully crafted story about wanting to honor her late husband, a passionate animal lover, by volunteering her time. Her age and apparent sincerity were the perfect camouflage. No one questioned the nice old woman who just wanted to help. The meeting was held in a sterile conference room at the Apex Consolidated headquarters, and at the head of the table, running the meeting with brisk. The moment the elevator doors slid shut, Sarah Jessup's composure shattered. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, the leather portfolio dropping to the floor with a heavy thud. She stabbed at the screen, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. It rang twice before he answered, his voice infuriatingly calm. "What is it, Sarah?" "I'm in a board meeting." "She knows," Sarah hissed into the phone, her voice a venomous whisper. "The old woman from Gable Lane. Karen Davison. She knows." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Knows what? That her pool was an eyesore and a violation? Of course she knows. I made sure of it." "No, you idiot," Sarah snapped, the disrespect for her father startling even herself. "She knows about us. She was here, at my office. She cornered me. She mentioned you, the HOA, your developer daughter. She was playing with me, Dad. This isn't some confused old woman. She's smart." Abernathy's tone shifted, losing its smug edge and taking on a defensive growl. "That's impossible. No one knows. The plan is airtight. Your plan had a gaping hole, and it's a 65-year-old widow with a grudge and apparently a talent for espionage." Sarah paced the small confines of the elevator, her mind racing. "You were supposed to be subtle. You were supposed to apply pressure slowly across the whole neighborhood. Instead, you went after her with a sledgehammer, you made a spectacle of it, and you made her desperate. Desperate people do research." "I did what was necessary to secure the key property," he retorted. "It's done. The lien will be filed by the end of the week. She'll be out in 6 months. We don't have 6 months if she starts talking." Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. "My name, my reputation, is on the line. Apex cannot be connected to this strong-arming tactic. This entire project is worth hundreds of millions, and you're letting it get torpedoed by your petty Napoleon complex. You had to be the big man, didn't you? You couldn't just be the quiet, effective tool." The insult landed. The silence on the other end was cold and heavy. When Abernathy finally spoke, his voice was laced with ice. "I will handle Mrs. Davison." "How?" Sarah challenged. "By fining her for the color of her petunias? You've already played your hand. She's not scared of you anymore. You need to fix this." Quietly, the line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Her father was a bully and a bureaucrat, a man who operated with the blunt instrument of the rulebook. He was out of his depth, and for the first time she realized her carefully constructed career was tethered to a man she couldn't control. Back on Gable Lane, Karen was narrating the encounter to a wide-eyed George. "You should have seen her face," Karen said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "It was like watching a statue crack." "So what now?" George asked, pouring them both a celebratory, if slightly shaky, glass of sherry. "We've rattled the queen bee. What's the next move?" "We give the rest of the hive a reason to sting him," Karen replied, her eyes drifting to the HOA bylaws sitting on her coffee table. "Abernathy's power comes from that book. He uses it as a weapon. We're going to turn it into a shield for everyone else. And a cage for him." She tapped a section of the bylaws. "Every homeowner has the right to inspect the association's financial records with 10 days written notice." George's eyes lit up with understanding. "An audit. Not a full, formal audit yet. That would take months and a lot of money," Karen clarified. "Just a simple inspection. You're an accountant, George. You know what to look for. Abernathy has been president for 6 months. He's been levying fines left and right. Where is that money going? Is the landscaping contract he signed with that new, expensive company owned by his cousin? Are the legal fees for coming after me being paid out of the general fund? We just need to find one thing. One loose thread." The next morning, a certified letter, drafted by George with meticulous legal precision, was delivered to Bartholomew Abernathy, formally requesting a full inspection of the HOA's financial records for the past year. The effect was instantaneous. Abernathy, already reeling from his daughter's furious phone call, saw the letter as a declaration of war. His response was not subtle. He believed the best defense was a relentless offense. Over the next 48 hours, Oakwood Preserve was buried in an avalanche of white and yellow paper. Violation notices appeared on nearly every door. The Millers, who had been so smug about Karen's pool, received a $200 fine because their son's bicycle was left on the lawn for 3 hours. Mrs. Gable, a woman whose prize-winning roses were the pride of the neighborhood, was cited for planting unapproved, non-native flora. A dozen houses were fined for having mismatched garbage and recycling bins. The Martha Gable's living room, usually a tranquil space filled with the scent of potpourri and the soft ticking of a grandfather clock, was buzzing with the nervous energy of a hornet's nest that had just been kicked. A dozen neighbors were crammed onto her floral sofas and antique chairs, a collection of the wronged and the furious. Each clutched a violation notice like a personal insult. Mr. Miller, who had once smirked at Karen's plight, was now red-faced and sputtering. "A fine for my son's bicycle. He left it out for an afternoon. What is this, a military state? He told me my garden gnome, a gift from my granddaughter, was aesthetically discordant," added another woman, her voice trembling with indignation. Martha Gable, a woman Karen had only known for her polite waves and prize-winning roses, stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed, a general surveying her troops. "He's trying to intimidate us. He's trying to divide us. He thinks if he makes us all afraid, we'll turn on each other and forget what he did to Karen." All eyes turned to Karen as she and George entered the room. The atmosphere shifted. It was no longer just about petty fines. Karen was the living embodiment of how far Abernathy was willing to go. The crater in her backyard was a warning to them all. Karen didn't wait for an invitation to speak. She walked to the center of the room, her presence commanding a silence that her grief-stricken pleas had never achieved. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice calm and steady. "What happened to my pool wasn't the endgame. It was the opening shot. Mr. Abernathy isn't just a bully with a rulebook. He is a corporate operative." A murmur of confusion went through the room. Karen let it die down before she continued. "He is here to drive us out. All of us. With George occasionally interjecting to clarify a financial detail, Karen laid out the entire conspiracy. She told them about Apex Consolidated, the quarry, and the proposed 4-lane road. She explained the strategy of 1,000 paper cuts, using fines and liens to devalue their homes until they were forced to sell cheap. She pointed out the window, in the direction of her own house. My property is the linchpin for their road. That's why he came after me first. But once I'm gone, who do you think is next? Whose home is in the path of the on-ramp? The fear in the room curdled into something colder and harder. It was one thing to be harassed by a power-mad neighbor. It was another to be the target of a multi-million-dollar corporation. And it gets worse, Karen said, letting the weight of her next words settle. The head of this project at Apex, the woman signing the plans, is his daughter, Sarah Jessup. The room erupted. The raw, audacious nepotism of it all was a unifying blow. They weren't just victims of bureaucracy, they were obstacles in a family's path to riches. What can we do? Mr. Miller asked, his earlier anger replaced by a grim sense of dread. They're a corporation. They have lawyers' money, we have the truth, Karen countered, her gaze sweeping across the room, meeting each of their eyes. And we have each other. We are not going to fight them in a courtroom. We are going to fight them right here, in our homes and on our street. We're going to fight them in the light, where they can't hide. She laid out her three-front war. First, the finances. George and I have already filed the request to inspect the HOA's book. The 10-day waiting period is almost over. We are going to find out where our money is going. George, emboldened by the supportive crowd, stood a little straighter. If there is even $1 unaccounted for, one contract given to a friend, one payment that doesn't have a receipt, we will have him on breach of fiduciary duty. Second, Karen continued, the rules. He uses the bylaws against us. From now on, we use them for us. We will follow every rule to the absolute letter. Our lawns will be perfect. Our trash cans will be invisible. We will give him nothing, absolutely nothing, to fine us for. We will starve him of his power. And while we do that, we document everything. Every interaction, every threat. We build a mountain of evidence. And third, she said, her voice dropping, we go after the head of the snake, not the puppet. Sarah Jessup. She has a public image to protect. She's the face of a major corporation. She's a board member for the city animal shelter. A woman who bullies a neighborhood of senior citizens and families to make a profit doesn't fit that image, does it? A slow, wicked smile spread across Martha Gable's face. The Pause for a Cause Gala. It's their biggest fundraiser of the year. The mayor will be there. The local news. Exactly, Karen confirmed. We're not going to let this stay a quiet little neighborhood dispute. The energy in the room had transformed. The fearful, angry homeowners were now a disciplined, determined council of war. They divided you.